The whisper slid between the tolling church bells, like a razor through silk. "Sir, your wife is alive. She's in California." The words didn't echo. They sank, straight through my ribs, through the black suit I'd worn only twice in my life, and down into the hollow place where my heartbeat had been. Before you continue, don't forget to subscribe, and let me know in the comments where and when you're watching. Rain freckled the stone steps of the small chapel in Denver, each drop snapping on the stone like a second hand striking a clock face. Mourners in damp black coats huddled under umbrellas that shivered in the wind. The scent of lilies and cold earth clung to the air. I didn't turn toward the man who'd whispered it. My fingers just tightened on the silver wedding band in my palm until the edge bit a thin crescent into my skin. Inside, a mahogany casket waited at the altar. Closed. Not a single scuff on the brass handles. Not a wrinkle in the satin drape. It was as if death had dressed up for the occasion, all pressed collars and neat seams. "She died on I-70, I heard myself mutter, though no one had asked. They said it was instant. A clock chimed somewhere in the chapel foyer. 12 slow strikes. Each one landed in my chest like a nail. If she's alive, then who am I burying? And what else in this family drama has been nothing more than theater? Dust lay on every surface of the watch shop like a quiet verdict. The brass pendulums stood frozen mid-swing, their reflections dulled to a ghost of light. For 30 years, this room had been full of ticking, time breathing through the walls. Now it just held its breath. I sat alone in the kitchen, a single bulb casting a weak, amber halo across the table. The paper edges of the death certificate curled slightly from the heat of my coffee mug. Next to it lay the life insurance claim. $500,000. Kevin's signature printed in black ink so sharp it looked carved into the page. "Why would my own son file this?" I whispered to the empty chairs. The silence seemed to listen. I picked up the certificate again. The coroner's stamp, the date on the corner, March 17th, 2022. The day they said she died on Interstate 70. My thumb traced the seal as if the wax could still be warm. Kevin had said he'd handle the paperwork because I was too shaken. I remember nodding through the fog of grief. I had believed him, because fathers are built to believe their sons. I looked around the room. Every object felt like an exhibit in a shrine. Her teacup still hanging on its hook, the half-knit scarf she'd left on the couch, the dent her slippers had made in the carpet. The house wasn't home anymore. It was evidence. My chest tightened, not the sharp ache of grief, but something colder, the faint outline of deceit. I dialed Kevin's number. The ringtone climbed the walls like a nervous animal until he answered. "Dad?" His voice was brisk, distracted, like he'd just stepped out of a meeting. "Tell me the truth," I said. "About what?" "About why your name is on her insurance claim." There was a pause, 3 seconds too long. Then, "Because someone had to. You were falling apart." I closed my eyes. Falling apart is what love is supposed to be for. But maybe Kevin had already stepped outside of it. The report from Interstate 70 glowed faint blue on my laptop screen, its official header sterile and calm, like it had nothing to do with heartbreak. I scrolled through the list of victims and survivors again, slowly this time, as if reading carefully could make her name appear. But Laura Turner wasn't there. I double-checked the EMS dispatch logs, the coroner's intake list, even the local paper's accident brief. Nothing. The silence of her absence screamed louder than any confirmation. The old wall clock in the shop ticked behind me, sharp, metronomic. Time had kept moving, and I had been the only fool standing still. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping the wood. "So, I cried for who?" I whispered to the dim kitchen light. The air didn't answer, only trembled in the heat rising from the radiator. The kitchen smelled of machine oil and lemon cleaner, the scents of 2 decades of shared mornings. Now they only smelled like ghosts. I found the cardboard box of Laura's belongings Kevin had brought from the hospital, the ones they said had been recovered from the wreck. Inside, a torn blouse, her silver watch with the cracked glass, and a charred leather wallet. I remembered the day I bought her that watch, spring 1998, from a pawn shop on Colfax Avenue for $62. She had laughed, said, "It's older than both of us," and wore it every day. But now the hour hand was stuck between 7 and 8, like it had stopped the moment her story did. Or maybe the moment they wanted me to believe it did. I picked up the death certificate again. The ink felt heavier now, as if the letters themselves were lying. The shape of deceit isn't always loud. It sometimes hides inside paperwork, waiting for you to notice the smudge in the corner. I called the Denver County Clerk's office. "Hi, this is Michael Turner. I'm trying to confirm a death record. Laura Turner, accident on I-70, March 17th, 2022. The clerk paused. I heard typing, keys clattering like tiny hammers. "I'm sorry, sir," she said finally. "There's no record of a Laura Turner listed as deceased on that date." Something cold coiled in my chest. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there listening to the shop clock strike midnight. Each chime landed like a question mark. If she wasn't in that crash, then where had she been all this time? The booths at Oakwood Diner were lined with cracked red vinyl that squeaked when you sat down and smelled faintly of burnt coffee and maple syrup, the kind of place where time didn't move so much as settle. Kevin sat across from me, shoulders squared, stirring his iced tea without looking up. The clink of the spoon kept an uneasy rhythm, like a metronome trying to hurry the silence along. I pushed the laminated menu aside. "Did you really file the insurance claim, Kevin?" My voice sounded quieter than I meant it to, like it had aged a decade on the way out of my throat. He didn't look at me. "Dad, you should be resting. This isn't good for your heart. Answer the question." Kevin sighed through his nose, a sharp hiss. "You were grieving. Someone had to take care of it. I just did the paperwork. It's done." "Is it?" I let the word hang there, heavy. The waitress brought our food, $9 meatloaf for me, his usual double burger. And Kevin dug in like it was any other Thursday night, like the world hadn't been cracked open between us. "You signed your name on a $500,000 claim," I said, "without telling me." Kevin's fork froze halfway to his mouth. For the first time all night, he looked at me directly. His eyes were dark, and for a second I thought I saw something flicker behind them. Fear or defiance, I couldn't tell which. "I did what needed to be done," he said. "Mom's gone. We have to move forward. But if she's not..." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Kevin blinked, slow. Then he laughed, a small, dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You're exhausted, Dad. You're chasing shadows." Maybe he was right. Or maybe shadows were just where people go to hide their truths. In that moment, it felt less like dinner and more like cross-examination, the kind of sharp tension that lives at the heart of a family drama when love starts sounding like strategy. I watched him eat while my meatloaf went cold, and wondered if my son had already decided which side of this story he wanted to live on. The story still has many unexpected twists. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss them. The flight to Los Angeles felt like drifting through someone else's dream. Too bright, too fast, and far from the muted tick of my shop back in Denver. I sat by the window, watching the patchwork desert below flatten into endless beige, wondering how many lives fit between here and the Pacific. When the plane touched down at LAX, my chest tightened. Not the ache of age, but something sharper, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't touched in years. I took a cab to a low-rise building on Wilshire Boulevard, where the blinds were always half-drawn, and the parking lot smelled faintly of old rain and cigarette smoke. Riley Grant, the private investigator I'd found through a retired friend, looked like he'd been carved from the same material as the office furniture, worn but stubborn. He didn't offer a handshake, just a nod. "You're Turner?" "Yes. $4,000 up front," he said. tapping the corner of a yellow legal pad. "If she's alive, I'll find her. If she's not, you'll know that too." I slid a cashier's check across the table. The pen on his desk clicked open like a starting pistol. He asked for dates, names, copies of the insurance claim, the coroner's report. I laid the papers out between us like cards in a game I didn't remember agreeing to play. He studied them, one eyebrow twitching at the inconsistencies I'd begun to notice myself. Wrong hospital codes, a missing VIN number on the crash report. "You see it too," I said. He leaned back, folding his arms. "I see a pattern that doesn't want to be seen. That usually means someone's hiding it." The words hung in the stale air. I thought of Kevin's laugh at the diner, the one that hadn't touched his eyes. As I left, Riley called after me. "Mr. Turner, don't expect to like what I find. People who fake their deaths rarely do it for reasons you'll respect." Outside, the evening had folded over the city, neon spilling across the pavement like paint from a cracked jar. I stood on the curb, the receipt from Riley's office still warm in my pocket, and wondered how far love could stretch before it became something else entirely. The first seeds of a revenge story had taken root. Not because I wanted revenge, but because truth was starting to feel like the only weapon I had left. The email from Riley Grant arrived just past midnight, the subject line flat and unremarkable. Confirmation. But the attached photo was anything but. Laura stood outside Coastal First Bank on Santa Monica Boulevard, sunlight sliding down the glass facade behind her like molten gold. Her hair was shorter now, curled at the ends, and her smile was a quiet, private thing, like she'd left half her face behind in Denver. Next to her, Kevin held a folder bulging with papers. He was mid-laugh, head tilted toward her as if she'd just told him the kind of secret people only tell when they've chosen sides. My heart clenched like the mainspring of a watch wound too tight. The photo felt less like proof and more like a betrayal caught mid-frame. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. The bank's sign. The date on the window reflection. April 4th. 17 days after her funeral. 17 days after I'd stood over a closed casket and believed the world had ended. Riley's message was 2 lines. "They opened a joint account. Large deposit flagged by the bank's system. Want me to dig deeper?" I stared at the words, at her face. My wife, alive. My son, complicit. And me, somewhere between a ghost and a fool. I dialed Riley, my voice tight. "Go deeper," I said. "You sure? This won't be pretty." "Neither is what they did." There was a silence on the line, then a soft chuckle. "Fair enough. I'll get back to you in 72 hours. I closed the laptop and just sat there at the kitchen table, surrounded by the soft ticking of the clocks that had outlived our vows. Each tick sounded like a small hammer on glass, as if time itself were asking whether it should keep going or just stop. Trust, I thought, is a currency you don't realize you've spent until the account hits 0. And tonight, I was officially overdrawn. The phone cord curled like a nervous animal around my fingers as I waited on hold. Tinny jazz hissed through the receiver, broken every few seconds by a soft, automated voice thanking me for my patience, as if patience were the currency they were about to take from me, too. I'd called Everguard Mutual from the back office of my shop, the blinds drawn, the clocks all silenced. Even their steady ticking felt too loud for what I was about to do. I had given the receptionist a false name, claimed to be a concerned policyholder. Finally, a human voice came on. "This is Dana from Claims. How can I assist you today?" I kept my voice even. "I'm calling to confirm a life insurance disbursement. Policy ending in 3472. Has it been paid out yet?" There was typing on the other end, a soft rapid fire like rain on metal. Then, "Yes, sir. That claim was processed and paid last week. $500,000 issued via cashier's check to the beneficiary on file." The air in the office seemed to contract. "Beneficiary name?" I asked, forcing casualness into my tone. "I'm afraid I can't disclose that without authorization," she said, polite but firm. Of course she couldn't. But I already knew. Kevin. My son had signed her death into existence, and the company had rewarded him with $500,000 for the performance. I hung up slowly, the click of the receiver loud in the hollow room. The glass counter reflected me faintly, a thin, graying man in a dark sweater, eyes sunken from nights spent chasing shadows. But shadows, I realized, don't create bank accounts. People do. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder from Riley Grant, the one with Laura's smile frozen in front of Coastal First Bank. The sight of her there, alive, laughing, felt like watching someone pick up your gravestone and walk away with it. This wasn't grief anymore. It was theft disguised as mourning. And like the gears of an old watch catching at last, something inside me clicked forward. If this was their stage play, it was time to pull the curtains down. Kevin showed up just after 11, headlights washing across the faded siding of the house before cutting to black. The night was so quiet. The gravel crunched like glass under his shoes. I was still at the kitchen table, the photo Riley had sent lying between the salt shaker and my untouched mug of tea. He stepped inside without knocking, shoulders tense, eyes flicking toward the darkened shop front as if the walls might be listening. "You've been digging," he said flatly. I didn't answer. I just slid the photo across the table. Laura's face caught the dim bulb light as it moved. Kevin's jaw clenched. For a moment he looked 16 again, the same tightness he wore when he got caught sneaking in after curfew, except this time the stakes were measured in dollars, not missed bedtimes. "You wouldn't understand, Dad," he hissed, switching to English halfway. "You don't get it. You're old. I need capital. I needed a clean start." "A clean start paid for with my grief?" My voice cracked on the last word. He looked away, knuckles white on the chair back. "You've been clinging to a shop full of broken clocks your whole life. I couldn't stay trapped in that." "Then why bury her?" I asked quietly. "Why make me stand at an empty grave?" His lips parted, but no words came. The silence was louder than his justifications. It pressed against the old walls, against the smell of machine oil and lemon polish that had soaked into every corner of this place. For years I had believed the line between love and loyalty was solid. Tonight it blurred like ink in water. The shape of deceit stood between us, silent, breathing, undeniable. Kevin turned, hand already on the door. "You were never going to give me your blessing," he said. So I took it, and just like that, he was gone again, leaving the screen door swaying behind him as if the house itself couldn't decide whether to let him go. The most dramatic part is still ahead. Don't forget to hit subscribe and join me to the very end. The shop was too quiet. Every clock had something to say, and all of them said it at once, sharp ticks echoing like hammers striking glass. Time had always been my companion. Tonight, it was my accuser. I sat behind the counter, the same oak one Laura and I had polished every Sunday for 30 years. A half-finished repair lay open before me, a pocket watch with its brass heart exposed. My hands hovered above it, but the tools felt like foreign objects. What had I lost, really? A wife who chose to vanish? Or the son who helped her do it? The question rang louder than the clocks. I stared at Kevin's photo on the wall, age 12, holding a toy race car, grinning like the world had just begun. Now he was a man who had buried his mother alive on paper and sold the lie for $500,000. The betrayal sat in my chest like a stone, pulling everything inward. This wasn't just about money. It was about the fracture in the foundation of blood. The phone buzzed, a text from Riley Grant. "Digging into bank records, tracing funds. Might take 48 HRs, don't talk to Kevin." I let the phone fall to the counter. "Talk to Kevin? How do you talk to someone who speaks fluently in silence?" I rose, moving through the shop in the dim light, brushing dust off old grandfather clocks like passing gravestones. This place had always been about second chances, broken things made whole again. But tonight it felt like a museum of what could no longer be fixed. The word family drama echoed in my mind, though it felt too small, too fragile for this rupture. Drama ends when the curtain falls. This would echo far longer. I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and stood there listening to the last clock wind down into stillness. For the first time in years, the shop and I shared something. We were both out of time. The flash drive clicked into place like a bullet sliding into a chamber. On it, the photo from Coastal First Bank, the falsified death certificate, the payout confirmation from Everguard Mutual, even the timestamps from the crash report that never mentioned her name. I sealed it in a padded envelope and drove it to the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office on 17th Street, Denver, my pulse keeping time with the wipers smearing sleet across the windshield. The building loomed in pale concrete silence. Inside, after 2 security checkpoints and a metal detector that beeped at the watch in my pocket, I found myself seated across from Cole Ramirez, a special agent whose expression had been carved from stone and paperwork. He flipped through the documents like a priest paging scripture. No sighs, no raised brows, just a careful, methodical dissection of my grief. "Mr. Turner," he said finally, laying the photo of Laura flat on the table, "if this woman is alive, this isn't just a family dispute, it's federal insurance fraud." The words rattled in the sterile air, sharp and cold. "She was buried," I whispered. I touched the casket. Cole didn't flinch. "If she's alive, someone bought that casket for theater." I thought of Kevin's voice in my kitchen. I needed capital. Was my son an heir or an architect? Cole tapped the folder. "We'll need subpoenas for the bank accounts, travel records, wire transfers. It could take weeks." "I've waited long enough," I said. He nodded once. "Then let's start." As I left the building, the storm had thickened, snow swirling under the street lamps like shredded paper. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning in secrets. I felt like I was holding one up to the light. And for the first time, it felt like this revenge story might actually end with something close to justice. 2 days later, Cole called me back to the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office on 17th Street, Denver. The winter sun was pale and sharp, like glass left too long in the cold. He didn't waste time. "They didn't even try to hide it," he said, sliding a printout across the table. At the top of the page, Turner Solutions, LLC. Registered 3 months ago in Delaware, listed as a consulting firm. Owners, Kevin Turner and Laura Turner. The paper felt hot in my hands, though the room was freezing. "They used my name," I whispered. Cole nodded. $500,000 wired directly from Everguard Mutual to this company's account at Coastal First Bank in Santa Monica, then split into smaller transfers across 3 other accounts. Classic layering technique. He clicked a remote. The screen on the wall lit up with flowcharts of bank transfers, arrows bleeding across the map like veins. "This," Cole said, "is how people wash lies until they look clean." I stared at the digital arteries of betrayal. Kevin's name pulsed on the screen like a cancer. Riley was in the corner, arms folded, voice low. "They planned this. Not impulse. Months of prep. Shell filings, dummy addresses. It's airtight. Unless one of them talks." I let out a brittle laugh. "Talk? Kevin hasn't told the truth since the day he buried an empty box." Cole didn't smile. "If we can prove intent, it becomes federal wire fraud. That carries up to 20 years. I felt the words land like a gavel. 20 years. My son, behind bars. Was I ready to watch justice destroy what little was left of family? The clocks back in my shop had always taught me that gears only move when something else stops. Maybe this was that moment, where my love had to stop so the law could finally move. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was architecture. An entire cathedral of deceit, built brick by brick, with my grief as the foundation stone. Cole gathered the papers. "We move to seizure next. Freeze the accounts. After that, indictments." Outside, the wind howled down the empty street, scattering old leaves like torn-up ledgers. For the first time, I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was hunting the living. The hallway outside her door smelled of sea salt and overripe oranges. Unit 3B at San Diego's Ocean Crest Apartments, 1,100 square feet of pale beige lies. I knocked once. The door opened halfway, chain still latched. Laura's face appeared in the gap, thinner than I remembered, framed by hair the color of fading postcards. "You came all this way," she said, voice level, like she was greeting a delivery man. "I buried you," I replied. She unlatched the chain and walked back inside, leaving the door yawning behind her, like an open wound. I followed. The place was immaculate. White couch, a glass coffee table, a single monstera plant that reached for the window like it knew how to escape. A mug sat on the counter, with steam still curling from its rim. She'd been making tea while I was rewriting her death. "Why?" My voice cracked on the word. Laura turned, folding her arms. "Kevin needed a chance. You've had your life, Michael. 40 years with your clocks and your routines. He needed to start something real." "Real?" I held up a copy of the death certificate. "This is real. Fraud is real. Coffins are real." Her lips tightened. "You don't understand. He was drowning. You would have watched him sink." "I would have given him my last breath," I said. "You didn't even ask." She flinched. Just a flicker. Then recovered, masking it behind that porcelain calm she used to wear when customers complained about scratched watch faces. "You think you're the only one who lost something?" she said quietly. "I lost both of you years ago. You to your shop, him to your shadow." Her words hit harder than any verdict. Was that what she believed? That love is measured in money, and legacy is something you forge by betrayal? The ocean roared faintly beyond the balcony doors, endless and indifferent. "This ends," I said, slipping the photo from Riley Grant onto the counter between us. "The Bureau has it. Your signatures, your company. It's all coming down." Laura's fingers hovered above the image but didn't touch it. "Then I suppose," she murmured, "we'll see who time favors." I walked out before the steam had finished curling from her cup. The most dramatic part is still ahead. Don't forget to hit subscribe and join me to the very end. Los Angeles Superior Courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and lemon disinfectant, like someone had tried to scrub the history off its walls. The marble floors clicked under my shoes as I walked toward courtroom 6B, clutching a folder of truths no one had wanted to carry. Kevin sat at the defense table, hands folded like a schoolboy about to confess a broken window. Laura sat beside him, spine straight, lips pressed so tightly together they looked stitched shut. The room hummed with the low murmur of reporters, the rustle of legal pads, the metallic clink of shackles as a bailiff adjusted the chain at Kevin's ankles. Time didn't tick here. It waited, crouched. Judge Eleanor Briggs entered, robes whispering. The gavel struck once. "This court is now in session." The prosecution laid it out like an autopsy. The fake death certificate. The $500,000 payout from Everguard Mutual. The shell firm, Turner Solutions LLC, opened in Delaware, funds wired through Coastal First Bank in Santa Monica. The photo of Laura and Kevin outside the bank, time-stamped 5 days after her funeral. Kevin began to cry somewhere between the wire transfer logs and the false affidavit he'd signed. Laura remained still, her silence louder than his sobbing. When the judge asked if they had anything to say, Kevin rose, chains clinking, voice barely audible. "I just wanted to start over." "By burning down the people who loved you?" I said before I could stop myself. The courtroom turned toward me like a flock startled mid-flight. Judge Briggs raised a hand. "Order." Then her voice came, level as gravity. 15 years in federal prison for Kevin Turner for conspiracy and insurance fraud. Laura Turner will face separate prosecution for aiding and abetting. The gavel cracked like a bone. I didn't feel triumph, just a hollow echo where a future used to be. As they led Kevin away, his eyes met mine, wide and young and breaking. The boy with the toy race car was gone, and in his place was a man made of ashes and ambition. And for a moment I wondered, was this justice, or just the cleanest way to end a family drama too tangled to mend? Denver greeted me with thin winter sunlight and the slow shuffle of wind down Sycamore Street. My house stood as it always had. White siding, green trim, the porch sagging like an old jaw, But the air inside had changed. It no longer smelled of Laura's lavender candles or Kevin's aftershave drifting from the upstairs hall. It smelled like dust, old oak, and whatever lingers when voices stop. I set my keys on the counter, and they sounded too loud. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum reluctantly, as if it resented being left the sole witness. In the bedroom, the wedding photo still hung slightly crooked. I didn't straighten it. Instead, I opened the nightstand, took out the small velvet box, and slipped my wedding ring inside. The click of the lid echoed like a door closing somewhere deep in the house. "Time to stop wearing ghosts," I murmured, though no one was there to hear. I placed the box in the safe behind the wardrobe, spun the dial until the tumblers whispered shut. It felt like locking away a whole season of my life, a summer that had overstayed and frozen into something brittle. Downstairs, the shop clocks had all stopped at different hours, each one marooned in its own moment. I wound one carefully, the brass key biting into my fingers, and listened as the tick returned. Soft, stubborn, alive. For the first time in months, it wasn't counting down to anything. It was just counting. The Turner watch and clock sign creaked when I unlocked the door, its chain groaning like an old throat clearing after a long silence. Inside, dust motes drifted through the morning light, slicing across the glass counter. The shop smelled of oil, brass shavings, and the faint memory of her perfume. Just enough to make my chest tighten. I flicked on the lamps. Their yellow glow spread slowly across rows of stopped clocks, each frozen at a different hour, as though time itself had panicked and fled the building months ago. A man in a corduroy jacket wandered in just before noon, clutching a pocket watch with a cracked crystal. "It belonged to my grandfather," he said. "Stopped sometime last spring." I nodded, lowering the magnifier over my eye. The tiny gears were stiff with age, reluctant to turn, like knees in the cold. I cleaned them gently, replaced the battery, and closed the back with a soft click. A pause. Then the second hand began to move, sweeping across the dial with quiet defiance. The man smiled, eyes misting. "Feels like he's talking to me again." "Maybe he is," I said. "Clocks don't keep time, they keep people." The sound rippled through the shop, timid at first, then steady, like applause from invisible hands. And for the first time since the funeral that wasn't, I let myself smile. Time hadn't forgiven us. But it had offered something gentler, the chance to keep going. The shop was quiet, except for the soft metronome of a dozen clocks. Outside, Denver was wrapped in early spring sunlight, the kind that melts snow just enough to make the sidewalks smell like earth again. Michael sat at his workbench, pen poised over a sheet of cream stationery. His handwriting came slowly, careful as if each word were a fragile gear. "Kevin, I still am your father. When you come out, walk with clean shoes. Don't carry ashes. Build something alive." He paused, staring at the photo frame beside the lamp. Laura's smile, Kevin's shy grin, his own hand resting on both their shoulders. The glass had a thin crack now, like a hairline fracture in memory, but it still stood. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's the act of keeping something upright long enough for the light to return. He sealed the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it by the door for the morning post. Then he wound a mantel clock and listened as it joined the others, a single voice finding its place in the quiet chorus. What had begun as a web of deceit had ended in stillness, not triumphant, but real. Even the messiest family drama can leave behind something worth keeping, if you choose to. Michael turned the shop sign to closed and stepped outside, the air sharp and clean. For once, he wasn't racing time. He was walking with it. Time doesn't heal everything, but it gives you room to. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts about it in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching. Wishing you health, peace, and time well spent with those you love. And next time, we'll open another clock and see what's been hidden inside it all along.